Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for staying. It's really good of you. And the first thing I must say to you is, I'm not here to sell you anything, okay? Because what I'm here to talk to you about, apart from what Andrew just said at the end there, was a program that we've been running in Airbus for the last 18 months or so, which has been funded by the government to really get big companies in Wales to do something different. And sorry, I've got to get used to these things as well. So, and if I'm distracted by the thing here, I've got my notes on a phone, so I've got not enough hands, I think, at the minute. Right, we were asked by the government about 2 years ago, along with a number of other anchor companies in Wales, basically, if they gave us some money to do something we otherwise wouldn't do, what could we do that might have a positive impact on the economy of Wales? And the idea of this open innovation program, as they called it, is that really big companies have problems, they farm them out to, or they put it out into the big wide world, and little businesses come up with ideas, and it comes back in through the supply chain arrangements, and everyone gets bigger and better as a result of it. Well, being a big, complicated company of 156,000 people, making aeroplanes, military aircraft, space launchers, missiles, and complicated secure defense communication systems, that was a bit of a big ask for us. So what we looked at was the way that we work as a company, could that have any utility to the private sector? I'd say that private sector initially. And could we take our ways of working and help businesses grow? And the way that we do work, sorry, on this slide we have three parts of Airbus. I'm from the one on the right-hand side, defence and space. We make military aircraft, we make missiles and secure communication systems and satellite launchers, aerial photography and satellite-based imagery of most of the world. Pretty complicated stuff. But we work in a fashion called, sorry, this thing is really confusing me. The Open Innovation Programme had some objectives really set down by the government, and we were going to create what we call a living laboratory. And this is the way that we work on a number of projects within the company with our customers, our big governmental customers. And I'll explain more of that in a minute. And we were to reach out to develop a community of interest of businesses that would support that. We'd bring some experience that we'd have in Singapore and Moscow, where we're looking at smart and safer city programs. And really, we were going to try and create this environment to see if we can make things better. And underlying it all, because it was underpinned by the Minister for Economy, Science and Transport, could we add some economic value to Wales? And this living laboratory is kind of like the middle piece of it, the crux of it all. It's a place, it's a playground, it's a facility, and it's a concept of working. It's a place where you undertake having defined a problem, and looked at people who might help solve that problem. You then model the problem. You digitize the problem as much as you can. You simulate that problem through digital analysis, and then you visualize that problem outputs when you run your experiments. So in military terms, there'll be mission planning. You'll model that, you'll create all the data sets. How many aircraft have we got? How many troops have we got to move? What's the payload? What's the flight time? What's the this, that, and the other? What's the weather? And you can create a model. Now, if you played SimCity on the computer, this is like SimCity on steroids, okay? And you then sort of play games with this, basically, and you create scenarios and you work out not necessarily the best scenario, but certainly the least worst scenario. And you do that at relatively no cost, and you take out an awful lot of risk along the way. And it has a sort of requirement that people have got to come to it and work together, both the people who've got the problem, Ministry of Defence on one side, and the solution providers, actually companies who are in competition with each other, leave their competitiveness at the door and work on creating and co-creating solutions for the benefit of all. Now, You could be cynical and say, actually, the market's so big they all get a decent slice at the end of it, and that's probably true. But the concept is work together for co-creation and sharing as much as possible. So most of last year I spent time talking, early part of last year I spent time talking to all sorts of organisations in Wales about to see if we could get some interest. And really we started looking at the public sector then as a sort of potential source of problems. Even though we started off with the intent of working with the private sector, we suddenly thought something here that we could look at. And we had good positive reaction, good positive feedback, good positive engagement, and lots of interest. So at the same time, we kind of fell in with Newport, which isn't really surprising because we're based just on the outskirts of Newport. But Newport were kicking into an economic regeneration program, and we bumped into them at a conference when they were talking to their sort of university in Newport about that, and we said, we'd like to help you. We've got some ideas that we think might be of value in you to sort of help redevelop the city. And we spent some time, the sort of traditional way, how can we help you? What can we do for you? Kicking around, have you got any problems? Well, that took a bit of a while to run up a list of problems. The next challenge was actually working out the first problem that we would look at. So we took it back to our experience of safe cities in Singapore, our experience of securing and safely managing data sets, and our experience of the military, and we came up with a number of experiments within the area of how could we do some experimentation that would make Newport a safer inner city, in particular at night, to the benefit of the local economy. Now, the good thing was that was reasonably well defined. It wasn't the whole of Newport. It was Newport city centre, and that gave a very defined geography to work in. It also gave, from my perspective, a program that we could actually run through this pilot concept to see if it could work successfully. Now, the first thing we then did was to build a digital visualization of Newport. Now, that's a photograph you can see there, but actually we've got a three-dimensional fly-through, turn it up and down, swing it round and round, whatever you want to do with it, visualization model of Newport. And from that, we then layer in data to start seeing what we've got in and around Newport. And if you see on the right-hand side of that screen there, you've got some sort of color coding for various bits and pieces of data sets. Now, we didn't actually ask for a lot of data because we didn't want this pilot to be burdensome on Newport in any way, shape or form. So we ran a workshop. We identified a number of agencies to be invited to that workshop. We had police, fire, ambulance, health, hospital, street pastors, taxi companies, publicans, and the council, talking about what the problems were to see what things we could look at. And then from that, we extracted what sort of data could we make use of, and then how could we build it. We then built in a number of different experiments that looked at various bits and pieces about city centre safety. Now, again, full screenshots, but each of these are actually models. The top left-hand one, we modelled the CCTV coverage within the city centre. Now, by geolocating each CCTV camera, knowing how far it can go up and down and left and right, you can work out what it will see. You then put a 3D shape of a building in front of it, and you'll get different views. So that pink thing is, in the top left-hand image, is actually the coverage of one camera. The yellow dots on that one are actually crime incidents. Now, we started, so normally you sort of, these things might be unrelated. You might not bring these things together. But what we're trying to do here is say, we've got data that starts off with a map of Newport, and we start putting stuff on top of it and see what we can see. So what we then found was that, surprisingly, some crime happens inside CCTV covered areas, but a fair bit doesn't. Surprisingly, we were only looking at or unsurprisingly, we were only looking at the public sector CCTV. Why can't we bring private sector CCTV into this? That will then change our coverage. It'll change our bill for public sector CCTV management and will enhance the security of the city centre. The bottom picture, we undertake some what we call hotspot mapping. Again, depending on what sort of variables you want to play with, it can be crime, it can be CCTV cameras, it can be street lighting, whatever it might be in that instance, I can't remember. But we can see where things are. And we can put in time sets, and we can put in all sorts of other variables to reduce or enhance the view that you're getting. In the bottom right one, we've got a picture of the model of Newport at night with the street lights on. Now that is actually where we know the street lights are and how much lighting they will produce. The next stage at some point this year, I want to bring in real satellite-based imagery to show what lighting actually is in Newport, which will show the stuff that's blown and isn't working. But within that, you can see there are some bits of the city that are very bright. Well, why are they very bright? It's because lighting is provisioned by people who do street lights, who do roundabout signs, and then who do zebra crossing signs. And they don't necessarily talk to each other, so you get a concentration of light. And the top right one, is a piece of work we're still keen to work on. I'm really quite fed up with hearing about the poor ambulance service getting beaten up every month for their 8-minute response times. So we're looking at how we can help them understand real response times to talk about reality. And that map shows that where down in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got bottom left corner, you've got Baysleg ambulance station. And you've got, on that particular day, when that screenshot was taken, travel times of 8, 10, and 12 minutes in green, amber, and red. Now, in and of its own, that's probably pretty useless. But actually, if there is a time when you want to park up an ambulance, it may help to put it in the right place, because you can see where traffic movements are happening, because you've got dynamic feeds coming into this model, and you can see how people are moving around. We also undertook and do regularly a thing we call enterprise architecture. Basically, it's working out the best way to do something. And it often starts with an audit of how things are happening. You create an as-is model before taking on some ideas and to work out how it could be. And we were keen to introduce this concept from the military piece into the experiments we've done in the last year, because it became clear that what we need for better management of some of the problems we face is an enterprise-wide approach. It's not a council problem, it's not a police problem, it's not a whatever problem, it's everyone's problem to fix the challenges we face. And actually trying to develop some thinking at a higher holistic level was quite important. Now, don't worry about this diagram. It means nothing in some respects. It's just a diagram that shows the flow of a decision within a council that took about 15 or 18 months. Now, we put some enterprise architects in there to interview people involved in it and looked at what the model was doing, and we found it was broken in a number of places. Right? It was broken, but people, good, well-meaning people, are doing their damnedest to make it work. Right, so people are working hard in kind of an impossible situation. And underpinning that particular problem, we think that what they were trying to do at the time was illegal. They did not have the power to do it. Yet people just plow on because we all tend to do our very best. So having found how something is kind of not optimized, what we would do in an enterprise architecture approach then is try and optimize that and remove some of the barriers and try and make the whole of the process fly more smoothly. So we had a good experience the last year, I think. We've had some good positive progress. We had some really good engagement. And I think this idea of creating living laboratories and the Sim City on steroids, it has got some great potential. Long-term vision on that, I reckon we could build a great big Sim City with loads of variables and sliders and radio buttons and selectors, where you could even have, Newport Athletic, football results influence crowd behaviour at the railway station. You can model all this stuff and see how it would impact. But it wasn't all easy. There are some challenges in when you're doing this, not least of the fact that, you know, what I'm talking about is probably sounding quite wacky to some people, and I perfectly understand that. My wife tells me I'm off my trolley. So getting engagement all the time is quite challenging because resources are stretched on the other side. There's also, I think, a problem, generally speaking, in terms of enterprise-wide management in what I call plumbing. You know, all the right things happen, but they happen really badly in terms of getting from place to place to place. You know, passing information between organizations can be really, really quite tortuous. I was really encouraged in some places that there was a great willingness to share information. I'm really disappointed in other cases where information was completely under wraps and really quite difficult to get hold of. For whatever reason, I don't know. Anyway, we're drawing to the close, really, of our pilot program for the government, and it's kind of like we're going through a what next question at the moment. And we've put forward a proposal to Leighton Andrews in the last week, where we think that he ought to consider and ought to consider bringing the private sector in to help in some of the thinking in his public services innovation agenda. We are convinced that starting off with a public national data store is absolutely essential. Now, last year I went to the Greater London Council, the London Data Store. Boris Johnson established it a couple of years back. Have, I think, about 38 people working centrally on data and open data for London. Really, really fascinating visit. They know that by aggregating a whole range of stuff and looking at a whole range of decisions made over recent years, you know, one good example they regularly quote, apparently, is that they built 6 schools where they shouldn't have done. They built them where they had land, but they built them where they didn't have kids. Right? So because the guys with land said we could put a school here. So you do. So aggregate data, get a go-to point, establish a rallying place for open data, which I'll speak about again in a moment, and start to drive a user focus, you know, a citizen-based focus on data and experience of use around that. We've got a belief that aggregating data sets from all the agencies involved in whatever the problems are is a good way of observing data and sharing. And we've got some thoughts which we're putting forward to build an observatory. It's a horrible word, but it's the best we can come up with. An observatory network, an architecture for sharing information in a simple-to-access fashion. So it's visual. I really do believe that we need to visualize far, far more than we currently tend to do and make it simple for people to see things. And again, I'll mention that again in a moment. And then the third thing we want to create is what we really do believe that Wales could do with a living laboratory. Wouldn't it be great if, when we want to plan the closure of a motorway junction, we actually bring in all the variables in and around that motorway junction and plan and model and simulate until we come up with a good answer or the least worst answer? You know, currently we don't, but you know, we capture traffic data every 100 meters on the M4 about every 5 seconds. And that data has 2 things done to it. It's stored and ultimately deleted, right? That's not great. That's not great. So we're talking to highways about how can we model the M4? How can we model where the accidents are? How can we focus, you know, start seeing where things are and look around what variables you can do to change that? How can you use that data to predict what's going to happen on the M4? How can you use that to forecast the elements of change that you're going to have in terms of the motorway traffic? If there's an accident in Carmarthen, how long will it affect before it affects Swindon? You can do these things if you use data, because you can. I can't. I just hear it telling a story, but we've got guys who model stuff and simulate stuff and visualize stuff for a living. We've got the president of the European Modelling and Simulation Association here in South Wales. Not in Airbus, he's in a university in South Wales. We've got bright people, they can do it. So we really think we build a living laboratory. You can get a centralized service that would support big decision making for all our public bodies in Wales and generate collaborative solutions. Well, I think that's pretty cool. Now, this is a screenshot of a bit of London. All right? I'm going off tangent a little bit here, but I just want to ask people now who can maybe get involved in the upcoming sort of reorganisation debates, let's look at the data. Okay, don't look at a spreadsheet, look at the data in pictorial form on a map if you can. Now, these black things are what you need to be looking at. There are a few over here, and there are a few over here, and there's none here. That bit in the middle is the boundary between two boroughs in London. Right? Now, I didn't go looking for that. It just leapt out at me when I was doing some views of London last week. I have a belief that if you draw a boundary, people won't go up to it, they'll go almost to it, and then pull back. So if you're going to build something, we build in our patch, not all of our patch. So we've got a bit of fallow ground. I've done this with some schools in Wales as well, that you look at school proximity to boundaries, interesting view. You know, they're not serving the people, they're built within the mindset or the geographical boundary of that agency or authority, not where the people are. So, if you want to go to a library, don't live there. Okay? Next thing, we share data in this observatory space. So, I can't remember what the detail of this is, but this is, in terms of the absolute detail on there, it's dealing with, what I'm seeing on the screen, antisocial behaviour incidents in a certain period, and it's got some lighting, and it's got some CCTV, right? So that's 3 different agencies, one of which is not devolved. But we can share that, provided you've got the plumbing to plumb it into a system that everyone can get into and look at and get different views from. Because the guys looking at CCTV cameras, if you're on the maintenance team, you need to know the maintenance schedule. And if you click on a camera, you'll get some detail of the maintenance schedule. But if you're in the control room, you want to see the pictures. And you may want to start doing something with those pictures. So you can do that by system controls to actually generate the right view for the right people in the right place. Oh, sharing data. Citizen engagement. I think this is something that really revs me up. Not all the bright people in the world work for me. Not all the bright people in the world work for you or with you. There are some incredibly smart people just out there. Okay, and I heard a lovely story about 2 or 3 years ago of the owner of a gold mine in South America. He was the 3rd generation owner of the gold mine, and they were running out of gold to dig. Now, apparently, I'll take this for what I read, apparently the value of a mine is, you know, your intellectual property in the mine is actually all the seam, what's a real geo-something word, where your seams of gold are, right? There's some, you know, real intellectual property of that. So this guy convinced his board that he was going to release all his data onto the internet in a competition to see who could come up with ideas to dig for gold. And there was a £1 million prize for that, which stimulated some interest around the world. And the following year, and for a mine that was about to go out of business, the following year, they mined $500 million worth of gold, most of which came from seams they didn't know existed, most of which had been found by people who'd never been down a gold mine and couldn't tell us a shovel from a piece of gold anyway. They're just computer geeks, maths geeks, you know, data geeks. They like playing with this stuff. And actually, generating the solution was probably more exciting to many of them than actually winning the £1 million, although I could help them with that. So think about, you know, the potential for opening up what we've got, and making it available to everybody to do things. Now, open data, I think, scares people. Even closed data scares people. And it struck me earlier this afternoon that I haven't heard, apart from in a question over there just now, haven't heard anyone say, and all this is publicly available as part of our open data policy. And that's, I think, somewhere where we really ought to aspire to as a nation. I think we can become a really smart little country if we start opening up a bit more. Now, If the government has commissioned some research and has got some data and has paid for it, then I reckon I paid for a bit of that. So why can't I have a look at it? And that's fundamental in the sort of relationship of open data. Why can't you open data up for other people to use? Because going back to the geeky story, those geeks will find solutions to problems you didn't know existed if you let them just get access to, and I love this term, meander through the data, right? Meander through data until you find something really interesting. And they'll play it back to you. But what will then happen, of course, is that they will have evidence to their demands. And then maybe we might have to respond as a country. Data is important, right? I come from an environment where we manage and we secure top secret data. We provide the communication systems to the Ministry of Defence, and we provide communication systems in Parliament. We know what top secret, mission critical, life-saving data is all about. Don't get confused about security and personal and potentially embarrassing, right? Try and understand the policies with data and recognise that you can keep something back provided it's got some really good reason to do so. We must not, as a country, get left behind. Don't worry about the graph or what it says. It's just a pictorial of UK government expenditure by department last year. It's a statement of fact. So, in a sort of parallel life, I also comment on military activity around the world. I used to be in the army and I speak Welsh and I do some stuff for Welsh language radio and TV. And people talk to me about the challenges of the defence budget. And I say, but it's only a quarter of the Department of Work and Pensions, right? See what those graphs tell you in terms of relativity. Don't look inside a box about what, in that instance, one department might have. Look at how data sets across the piece can help shape and even challenge some assumptions. In terms of openness and not getting left behind, I was stunned to find the MOD, God bless them, the greatest profligates of money there are in Britain. They list every spend over 25 grand every month. And that, that's from £25,000 up to £400 million is detailed. In a spreadsheet, you can download it and have a look at it. Now, why are they doing that? They're just doing that to get people kind of on side, a bit of openness and honesty and frankness and engagement. But actually, it's all part of their policy of being open with data, which I think is a great one. We're in danger of being left behind. And I think that we can shift that and become a smart nation where we can share information and help build a better country. So what's stopping us? Sorry, what's this got to do with poverty? What's this got to do with poverty? Well, I think the honest answer is probably not much, straight up. But it could do if we start doing things differently. If we start using enterprise architecture approach, we will get more efficient. Let me give you an example. I was in Boston last year, went to the mayor's office, and the mayor in Boston has got 3 priorities. Clear the snow, fill the potholes, and collect the rubbish. Do that, and people vote for you again. Okay? Easy, easy. So, just imagine now, in the analog world, how someone complains about a pothole. They go boom, boom, over the pothole. They ring City Hall, someone stops doing what they're doing and answers the phone. They have a conversation, they take down some details. There's a problem with accents and understanding. The details are taken down wrongly, and someone says, thank you very much, have a nice day. They then pass it on to another department, and the same thing happens again, and they pass it on to somebody else who's got a lorry load of aggregate who goes out somewhere and finds that there isn't a hole where he was told to go to. What they now do is ask the citizen to take a photograph of the hole and press send on the app on their smartphone. And that photograph gets analysed for location because it's geotagged, and it's sent to the appropriate team. So if it's North Boston, it goes to the North Boston team. And it's assessed in terms of size. So in terms of, that hole that size needs half a ton of aggregate, or whatever it might be. And it eventually gets to the guy with a lorry who picks up his iPad in the morning, gets his job for the day, goes there, and his first task is is that the right hole? Takes a photograph to confirm he was at the right place. He fills it in and then takes a photograph of what used to be a hole. And he sends that back to the person who complains at the beginning. And they say, being American, thank you very much. Now, how cool is that? Because nobody has done anything. The citizen posted a complaint, and a hole gets filled. And nobody touches it on the way whatsoever. So, what does that do? That releases people to do more valuable and more interesting and more useful work in whatever environment they're currently striving. And I think that's important. Let's cut out the wasteful jobs. Let's get the technology to do things for us. And by doing that sort of stuff, we'll get more from the declining resources that we currently have. So what's holding us back? I think I've had some discussions over the last year about the availability of data. If you haven't got it and you want it, why don't you just go and find it? Would be my challenge. Some people are concerned about the quality. I had someone from an authority in west of here saying, oh, data's rubbish. There's no point using that. So I said, well, why don't we start cleaning it up then? Why don't we start generating some rules on what we want and how we want to capture it and what we want to do with it? As opposed to, rubbish, don't bother. I already mentioned security. Don't get too hung up on it. Understand the implications of personal data, definitely, for sure. Understand that some bits do become sensitive and need to be managed. And that's why part of our suggestion to government is to have a sort of a phased rollout of that. And without doubt, the thing that does hold us back to an extent now are resources. We came across that quite clearly in the last year, that people are, hey, hat tip as they say, really busy. So having someone like me shouting at you and asking, can we have some more data please, is not a great place to be. But you have to go through a bit of pain to get this all organised, to get it all stacked up so it can work more comfortably and better for us. And I advocate quite strongly that if you use the concept of a living laboratory to test and experiment and play around with data to generate solutions, you will come up with probably the right or close to the right solution for deployment into the live environment, rather than piloting a new roundabout on the Gabalva interchange. Right? Don't like piloting on the Gabalva interchange. That's not a great one for me. Right? You can do that on a computer, and that's what it's about. Plan it and do it and get a better result before you go live. You will, if you use that methodology, will have a digital conscience, and the scrutiny of spend within all our authorities in Wales will be so much easier, because we know why we spent money in the way we spent it, and we've got some comparators. It may have been a bit wacky, but I've enjoyed speaking to you. I'd be very happy to take questions, and I really ask you, just keep calm, use the data, haven't got it, go and get some. Thank you.